Welcome to the Awakened Collective, where we explore the topics of love, spiritual consciousness, and our divine purpose on this planet. Join us as we uncover the truth that our thoughts shape our reality. Welcome to the Awakened Collective. I'm Rick Gregory, and I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight. And I say tonight for the first time because we really have not had a guest in the evening before. So this is a first for us. And thanks to Audio Alchemy Productions and Daniel Anderson for the gift they are to the world and helping many of us get our messages out to all of you. And as always, I want to remind you that you have never been separated from your Creator. You are the divine extension of your Creator's love on this planet. I am really excited tonight to have a special guest we've been trying to get on for a little while. And he's had some issues with sickness in his family and his own illness, and I'm really, really grateful to have with us tonight author and pastor Josh Scott. He is an author and the lead pastor of Grace Point Church in Nashville, Tennessee. And I love their slogan that he has on Facebook, a human flourishing, reclaiming faith through a progressive Christian lens. Welcome, Josh. So glad to have you here with us tonight.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, you're going to see me looking at a couple of notes here because this afternoon I had some thoughts come to me with how I wanted to open this up. And of course, you can take this anywhere you want to. And we're going to get to your wonderful books as well. But I just wanted to say that what you teach, the messages that you post, your writings, and I'm sure your sermons, when I haven't had the privilege of hearing any of those yet, they are like an oasis in the desert. You can almost feel the water going into those dry cracks of your soul, dryness that has developed perhaps for some over years, like it had with me, of longing to know the truth, but falling short of it for grabbing onto the teachings of those you believe just had to know more than you. And I kind of liken that thirst to when Jesus was on the cross thirsty and they gave him bitter wine, it's not what we are truly looking for in our soul. And many are not able to put into words what they're feeling. They're trying to swallow teaching that's opposed to the truth within them, and yet they don't feel safe in questioning or expressing that for fear of rejection of men and the illusion of rejection from God. And yet here you are, speaking these truths loud and clear that rings bells in the human soul. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for that.
My gosh, that is so kind of you. I hope that's what my work is at least doing in some small ways for some people. Um,
It absolutely is. So I want to know personally, and how did you get here? Like, did your ministry start with you being this aware? Was there some turning point somewhere along the way? And if you could maybe just share a little bit of your story with all of us.
so when I started deconstructing my faith, nobody was really calling it that. It was in the early 90s.
Mm,
I was, 12, 13, and I experienced some significant loss. And it happened in such a way that I grew up under a sacred canopy, where all the questions had answers, and
mhm.
you do good things, God gives you good things, God only punishes bad people, all that. And it's sort of that those experiences just started poking holes in that sacred canopy. And I ended up beginning to preach. I went from, 12, 13, not wanting anything to do with God, really. I believed in God because I didn't know there was an option to
Yeah.
not. So I assumed God was real. I just thought God was kind of a jerk.
Yep.
And I ended up getting in a youth group in a conservative evangelical church, and sort of got thrust into speaking on a youth night, and just had this overwhelming sense that even though I was sort of introverted, there was something there that I needed to do again. And so I was preaching both when I was 15 or 16. And what I realized is I was giving sermons, and I was preaching the standard Southern Baptist stuff that I'd been given. But I would preach a sermon, and I would think while I was preaching, I'm saying words, but in my brain I'm going, that's not. that doesn't sound very good. Like, I know we're calling this good news, but it doesn't really sound like good news. It sounds kind of awful. And so I just had this intuition that the message that I'd been told was good news wasn't very good, and that there had to be something else. And I was really grateful to discover actually there's something else, and there are other ways of viewing this, ways that actually are good, and actually are it is good news for you know not just the person who believes it, but hopefully for the world.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because I had those same experiences as I pastored for many years, not wanting to go in certain directions because things just did not sit right with me, but always believing those that I thought knew better than I did, or those with more education, or those with longer years in ministry. I mean, that's kind of where we
Hmm.
learn, isn't it? It's kind of, we're learning, so we figure they know, and we're grabbing onto that information. And yet, when you go to say it, there's something that's not clicking. It's just
That's
not
right.
right. So, how did that, with that transition? Was it difficult for you to make that transition? I mean, did you change? Obviously, you're not I don't know if you're still in a Southern Baptist environment. Were there any
No.
fallouts?
Yeah. So at the time, when I really started I, sort of saying, I can no longer run away from this. I have to actually deal with this. I was in my early 20s and I was pastoring there was a church that was born out of a Southern Baptist, people who went to a Southern Baptist church, but it was non denominational. And it was, contemporary, but really conservative theologically. And so I'm, newly married. I need this job, and I can't say the things I need to say.
Mm,
And so I slowly start trying to interject new ideas and interject context and history and all those sorts of things. Um, and it changed me. It changed the church. We Lots of people left us. The more once I got to the point where I sat down and had a meeting with the leadership and said, "Here's where I'm at on all these things, on LGBTQ plus inclusion, on atonement, on all of that." And I said to our leaders, "This is my journey, and I have to take it. But it may not be this church's journey. If it's not, let me know. I can resign. You can find somebody else."
mhm.
To their credit, to a person, they all said, "No, we need to take this journey together."
Wow.
Now, about a year later, there were like two of them still around, but yeah, those early days of trying to preaching like this weekend being Easter, today's Good Friday. There was a time when I dreaded Easter, Christmas, holidays because people wanted me to say things that I could no longer say, and they wanted a certainty about things that I could no longer provide. And so it was a real challenge. It was, trying to balance sort of your integrity, not saying something you don't believe,
Yep.
while also somehow figuring out how to, feed your family. That's the tightrope. And I learned a lot, and those things really shaped me.
And so I imagine you've got more than 2 people that are listening to you now.
Three. I think I got three. And
That is just it's wonderful, and the fact that you were interjecting it slowly, regardless of what happened there, I think that is really powerful. I was just sharing something on Facebook today that, I was on my way to New Orleans, and I'm from Massachusetts, very liberal state. I was married to my husband in Massachusetts in 2006, and that was after years of ministry, telling my wife before we were married that I was more attracted to men, but that God was going to fix me, and both of us believing that, crying I can't tell you at how many altars for 20 years, asking God to change me, finally having the awakening that God loved me the way I was, and that
that's
I
right.
needed to follow Him with my authentic self. And so I stepped down from ministry there, became an alcoholic during that time, and
Mm.
got sober 5 years ago. Which my life has completely turned around since then. But when I first moved here to Mississippi from Massachusetts, it was rough. It was
Mhm.
rough, and I remember I met my current husband, a little bit into that, so I moved here in 2012, met him in 2014. He was attending, a church, that was pretty, the worship was amazing, the messages were amazing, we were really liking it, but it was a church that, was not LGBT, affirming in any way. We found
Hmm.
another one that we thought was, talked to the pastor, it was wonderful, we were there for a year and we're becoming members, and kept waiting for that day when they called you up front to say, "Welcome our new members to the church," and that didn't happen. We got called into an office and said we had to be willing to sign this piece of paper that said that a marriage was between a man and a woman, and so we weren't able to stay, and let me tell you, getting sober, we make our list of resentments, the church was on there.
Hmm. I
Um,
can only imagine.
and I remember coming in into meetings and, very early on, before I had any I thought I was awakened spiritually because I had a spiritual experience at 19 that led to becoming a Christian and all of that. But I see things so differently today. And, when I came into at the rooms of AA with that chip on my shoulder, and talking about, how much the church had hurt me, today I forgive them. And, I don't
Mm,
carry that around with me anymore. People do, what they believe, they behave in the ways that they believe and what they've acquired. So for knowledge,
yeah.
I,
One of the things for me, I went through a real angry period when my faith was unraveling, partly because I felt like it wasn't that the other information wasn't out there. It was that I felt like people had actively tried to suppress it, and they had actively tried to, only listen to this, only read this, or only talk to these people about this. And when I started reading people like Borg and Crossan and McLaren and those folks, it was like, whoa, 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 this stuff has been here
for a
and
long time.
for a long time. Like this, for whatever progressive Christianity, whatever you want to call it, is not this lens is not brand new.
That's
It
right.
has existed for a long time. You just Richard Rohr has this line where he says, "You can't see what you were taught not to look for,"
Mhm.
and so there was for me a little bit of resentment and anger, and I know that came through. I know in those early days I preached some really angry sermons.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah.
I just finished reading actually for the 3rd time, and I'm actually going through it again with one of my sponsees, is the book, Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. I don't know if you've read that.
Hmm.
That
Yep.
it was just it's like this he was written in, like, 1935, and, it amazes me that, like you said, it's been out there, but what I'm seeing, and you're probably seeing the same thing, and I know that Facebook and all the social media platforms have algorithms and all of that, so when I start searching for things, more stuff shows up, but there are a lot of folks out there that are getting this. It seems to be that folks are waking up, and that just
Hmm.
gives my heart joy. Um
Yep.
so I wanted to ask, what to you then could you just tell our audience what progressive Christianity is?
Well, what I'll say is you would probably have to ask every progressive Christian to get the full breadth of what that means, because how I learned in grad school that there's no such thing as Christianity. There are only Christianities, right? Like everybody has sort of their own unique. For me, progressive Christianity is a lens for viewing my faith, viewing Scripture, tradition, that essentially, Jesus tells this really great story, this little parable in the beginning of Mark, where he says, you don't put new wine into an old wineskin, because when the new wine begins to ferment and releases gas and begins to expand, the old wineskin is too brittle and it will explode. And so for me, progressive Christianity is making sure that we always have a new and flexible wineskin
Mhm.
for the wine that's fermenting, because we really are always learning, we're always growing. The process of transformation is not like I was taught when I was a kid that you sort of go up front at the altar, you confess your sins, you ask for forgiveness, you get saved in the
Yep.
past tense, and then you got it all. Like God backs up the divine dump truck and gives you everything you need, and then the rest of your life is trying not to screw any of that up.
Yeah.
When the reality is a journey of transformation. It's ongoing. It's about
Yes.
learning and growing. And so progressive Christianity is a way of looking at the Christian faith that says every discovery that needs to be made has not been done in the past. Everything that's need to be said has not been said. There are some things that were said in our past that at the time were steps forward, that if we hang on to them, would drag us backward.
Yes.
And yeah, I just think it's this way of approaching faith with curiosity and hope and an understanding that there's a lot more out in front of us to learn.
Yeah, and that, I think, in a nutshell, is what you mentioned as human flourishing. It's
Yep.
allowing us that freedom to grow. And, as I started to say, I posted this on Facebook today, but I saw a sign on my way to New Orleans, that big billboard that said, "Jesus is the answer to all your problems." And, I thought that statement kind of is a problem, because it's not Jesus in the form, in a body as a man, being idolized or following someone like you would follow a celebrity on Instagram. It's actually following the teachings. I mean, he transcended every human limitation and said, "Greater things would we do." It's the
Mhm.
truth. I ended it with saying that it's not Jesus that sets us free. It's the truth that sets us free, the truth that Jesus taught, the truth that Jesus is.
Mhm.
And he said so. It's just, I think we've really got that mixed up. But that lens that you mentioned, and just over these past 5 years, it seems that I'm getting new lenses, or and there's a book called A New Pair of Glasses. I'm seeing things differently, and I'm so grateful. It took decades to get here, but I'm grabbing every second of it now.
Yeah, I recently went to my optometrist, and I hadn't been lately, actually since COVID. It had been a while, and I could tell my eyes were changing. And I walked out of there with bifocals, which I wasn't quite prepared for. And just how differently when I wear my glasses now, I see more clearly, and that's an ongoing process, right?
Yes,
We're regularly having to upgrade our lenses. It's not like we get one prescription for the rest of our lives, but
that's
as our vision changes, we need to update our lenses. And I
I
think that
love that.
being a part of a tradition that says whatever God is, whatever the word God points to, we're talking about mystery. And
Mhm.
so we should, if we expect anything, it should be that we're going to learn new things, that we're going to have new hunches, that we're going to have new curiosities, new questions, and it's going to lead us in new directions.
Yes. I have a coach that uses the analogy of grabbing onto a cheap, empty water bottle and clinging to it, and I did that a lot, when you think that I found the truth, this is it, and I'm holding on to it, and it's
Mhm.
letting that stuff go and being fluid and just being I had to unlearn a lot like you did, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
God, it seems like time is as within a shorter period of time, it's like once we open our eyes, it just comes in like a flood. It really does change
Mhm.
everything. So tell us about your books. I'm gonna ask Danny, I know you've got a new book coming up, or it's
Yep.
actually no, it's out. Mine's not coming till Wednesday, but, I think it looks like some people have it. We're on a dual screen there, I think, Danny, right now. Okay. There
I got a copy right here too.
you go. There we go. Okay. We can still see you, Josh. All right, so Josh has got a new book, Context. Tell us about it.
One of the things I've noticed is, and actually my Twitter timeline today is a prime example of this, that we just have been taught, many of us, to read the Bible almost, it's what I call in the book ransom note style. And it's this idea, if you ever watched a movie like the movie Ransom, where it's, those kind of movies where somebody gets kidnapped and they get a letter from the kidnappers, and it's a bunch of different letters cut out of magazines. And they're all cobbled together to make one sort of seemingly coherent message. We read the Bible that way. It's like we're snipping out a verse here and a verse there, and we use them just to prove that we're right.
Mhm.
And the reality is, the Bible's not meant to be engaged in that way, because each passage, each chapter, each book has its own context that shapes what the author meant and what the author was doing. And so in the book, I sort of lay out the case for why we need to be concerned about context, but not just the context sort of generally, but specifically about for different texts. And then I go through six different texts or stories in the Bible and show how the way that we have typically engaged them has not been in context, and then what the difference is. Like, why is it different? What is the different meaning? Or why maybe is it more challenging or helpful if we engage it in context? Some of them are benign. In the book, I talk about 1 Corinthians 13 and how that's always read at weddings,
Mhm.
as if it were about, romantic love, when it's not about romantic love at all. Now, that's a benign example. right? But then you have another example like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which gets taken grossly out of context and is very malignant
Mhm.
in the way that it gets used to harm LGBTQ plus folks. So, we run the gamut between those two kind of poles and everything in between of, this, yeah, First Corinthians, it's not a big deal. I read it at weddings all the time, but it may be interesting to know what's really going on. And then, hey, there are certain texts that are being weaponized to harm people. And that is a terrible misuse of scripture.
Yeah.
And we have to do everything we can to correct it. And the way we correct it is context.
I love that, and I cannot wait to read it, and I'm sure I'll be getting multiple copies. That sounds wonderful. And in fact, we just,
Thank you.
one of my podcasts recently, we read through First Corinthians 13, and I mentioned the fact that, we hear that and we think that it's for weddings, and it depicts God. When I'm beating myself up and I'm not just the other day, I made some foolish mistake on a video. I was on a conference call with someone, and I thought of it, and I could not get that out of my head that I made this misstatement, beat myself up over it, holding on to it, and came back to love keeps no record of wrongs.
Mm,
That if we want to know this God, by whatever name you choose to call God, is about, God is love, and that is the portion of
that's
scripture
right.
that speaks so loudly to me of that, and I go back to often, so I cannot wait to read that book. What about I haven't read
Thank
Bible
you.
stories for grown-ups either. What was that all about?
Yeah. So it was kind of similar in that what I was trying to do is say, look, there are several Bible stories that we were taught as kids, and I was taught them on flannel graph in a church basement, right? Where and you get sort of a very childlike understanding of the story of Jonah, right? Which is sort of boiled down to if you run from God, something bad's going to happen to you. You're going to get swallowed by a big fish. And first of all, some of the stories in the Bible just aren't for kids.
Yeah.
They just aren't for kids, right? They're just not there. If they were on TV, I wouldn't let my kids watch them. I'm not going to tell them to my kids. So that's a reality. But one of the problem with the way many of us were taught the Bible is that we were taught the Bible as kids with a sort of a boiled down, simplified understanding of these really complex stories. Then we were told this is all it means. It's all it can mean. Don't question it. And
Mhm.
so we grow into adulthood and we're hanging on to these really complex stories, but really simplified meanings that ignore what's going on in the text, like the story of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, for example.
Right.
That's a story I remember being taught as a kid. I don't know why, but I was, and it's way more complex than we've seen. The story of Jonah, way more complex than we've seen. Noah's and the ark and the flood, way more complex than we're told as kids. I mean, you go to any church nursery, probably you're going to see Noah and on a big boat with all these smiling animals and a big rainbow.
Yes.
Um, that is not the story we find in the Bible. And so, what I've tried to do is say, what if we, instead of kind of looking at these at 35,000 feet, what if we dive into the details? And then what if we try to ask, what does a responsible reading of this look like? And because the question we always end up wanting to know is like, what does this have to say to me, if anything? Trying to figure out what is a responsible way of taking a good interpretation and then trying to figure out what to do with it in the world we find ourselves in.
Mm. I love that too. So when I'm done with you here, Josh, I'm going on and ordering that one.
Ah, thank you. I hope you like them.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know it is Good Friday. Glenn mentioned that to me this week. He's like, he's coming on your show on Good Friday and he's a pastor. How's he doing that?
It
Especially,
is Good Friday.
yeah, especially with a family of 5 kids. I'm sure you have a lot going on. So my question to you then is if you would consider our audience as your church for a minute, do you have a message for us tonight?
Oh, well, the first part would be something we've already talked about and you already said so well, which is that you're loved. You're not a problem for God. God doesn't love you, air quotes anyway, which is what I heard people say a lot, and even said myself growing up, because that's what we were taught is that we were born these dirty, rotten, broken sinners, and that God couldn't, really come near us without killing God's own Son. But even though we're still awful people, God loves us anyway. And I think we got to drop the anyway. God loves us. You are the beloved of God. You bear God's image. And that's the first part. The second part is any religion or any doctrine that diminishes your humanity, that gets in the way of the full flourishing of your humanity. One early Christian father, Irenaeus, said that the glory of God is a human being fully alive. Anything that limits your fully aliveness isn't good news, no matter who's telling you it is, and no matter what scripture they're attaching to it. Because good news, gospel, should lead to human flourishing. And human flourishing doesn't mean, we're not talking prosperity gospel stuff here, right? We're not talking everything just always goes your way and you get millions of dollars and you're always, no. What we're talking about is being able to live from a whole center where you know who you are and you know you're beloved and you are moving toward goodness and flourishing.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. I'm so thankful that you were here with us tonight, that we finally got to connect, and
Me too.
bless you and all that you do. You are a gift to the world, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm grateful to get to call you a friend now.
Yes, thank you. Likewise.
So, Danny, I'm going to ask if you could just put up a shot of where folks could reach out if they have a desire to do so. This is all of Josh's contact information. You can reach him on Facebook at Joshua Adams Scott. His Insta is Josh_A_Scott. And if you're not seeing this, that's why I'm telling you what they are, because if you're on podcast, you're not seeing this video. So thank you, Josh, again. And Danny, if you could put up a shot of where folks could reach out to me. And this is at theawakencollective.org. Feel free to go out there. There's links to everything you could possibly need to know about us or want to know about us, but especially if you are struggling in any way. I would love for you to reach out and ask for help. It's what we are here for. Or if you just want to send a word of encouragement, we'll take those too. We all need encouragement. Thank you to Danny Anderson again and Audio Alchemy Productions. I love you, Danny. God bless you, my friend Josh. And folks,
Thank
until
you.
next time, love and kindness always.